church as a whole is we've become so focused on every other aspect of worship that we miss that what we find in the Bible is the reason that we worship. Because the Bible is the way that God reveals to us the nature and character of God in Jesus. And I'm not sure, I was reminded of it 3 weeks ago as we were in the middle of a praise and worship set, very much like the one that we just did, very powerful. God had moved, God had shown himself to us, and people were connected. And I walked out on stage and I just began to read the scripture, and there were students who were standing at the front of the room and they were worshiping, and that was beautiful. But when I began to read the Bible, here's what happened. That began to be their transition to walk back to their seats. And then I think about how many sermons I preach where it's as if what scripture says is just a transition to the next illustration. The transition to the next application. Because we cannot transition anything if not for what the Bible teaches. We cannot apply anything if not for what Scripture teaches us. We cannot worship except for what Scripture reveals to us about the nature and character of God in Christ Jesus. Scripture is what we stand on. It's everything we need for faith and practice. Because God has revealed himself to us in the Bible. He's shown us himself in Christ Jesus, saying that he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. When we read through Colossians, what you ultimately find is Paul is attempting to take the people from a place where their understanding of Jesus is very two-dimensional to a very three-dimensional idea. 3D movies are really big. When I was a kid, I remember the movie Jaws was in 3D. And you would go to the 3D movie and you would have these glasses that they would give you. But they weren't cool like the glasses that you guys steal when you go to the movies. These glasses, they were made of paper, and there was a red lens and a blue lens because it is supposed to look more realistic when you are looking through a red lens and a blue lens, I expect. So you're sitting at the movie and then it barely works. But now they've got movies that come out and they're in 3 dimensions, and like you're not even focused on your popcorn anymore. You're not focused on the girl whose hand you're trying to hold. All that you're focused on is what's taking place, because there are things coming at you over and over and over and over again. I went to see a movie a few weeks ago. It's entitled Thor. You may have heard of it. Some friends of mine and I had been to a going-away party for friends of ours who were moving back to Argentina, and after the going-away party, we decided to go to Thor because nothing says goodbye like the Norwegian god of thunder. And we go, and we're sitting in Thor, and we make the decision that we're going 3D, not 2D, and we're even going IMAX 3D, which means the screen will wrap around us. We were in Asgard. And as we're sitting in the theater over and over, I'm thinking to myself, I'm about to be impaled right here. They would swing a sword, and the sword would swing at me. I would, whoa. And then the big animal that looks like a pig and a dragon had a baby would walk out, and I would think it's about to eat me. Or the frost giant would throw an icicle, and I would think they're about to impale me. Or this hammer that they would not stop throwing at everything would swing at me. And I'm just thinking the entire time, I'm about to be knocked out. I'm moving my head. The importance of that is so that you're moved from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. Well, what we find in the book of Colossians is Paul's attempt is to show us, for this group of people who've come to a relationship with God in Jesus, this very early church, what he's saying is, your understanding of Jesus needs to be completely filled out. Because he's not just a regular guy. He's not just a guy who was born and did some really cool stuff. He's God himself. The idea of being a Christian comes down to this. A central truth of Christianity is this. You believe that Jesus is God. If you do not believe that Jesus is God, there is no way you can call yourself a Christian. Jesus is God. Paul says he's the image of the invisible God. So what he's ultimately saying to this early church is, if you want to know what God looks like, if you want to know what God sounds like, if you want to know things that make God happy, things that make God sad, if you want to know what brings up a frustration in the heart of God, then you look to Jesus. Don't play games. Don't look to anyone else for your answers. If you want to know the thoughts of the Creator of the universe, you find those in Jesus. There's nothing extra. Jesus is everything that God is. He's the image of the invisible God. The firstborn of all creation. So if we're not careful, we get tripped up on the word firstborn, because when you think of firstborn, you think of your mom and dad, and you're their firstborn, or your secondborn, or you're the thirdborn, or the fourthborn, which is the least loved. I'm just kidding. So you have firstborn. Like, no. Firstborn, ultimately, for the writer of the book of Colossians, is not a representation of the first child. When Paul says the firstborn of all creation, what he's saying is that Jesus has authority over everything that's been created. Jesus reigns and rules over all things. Nothing takes place that he does not allow, because he's the ruler of all creation. He's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. This early church dealt with this idea called Gnosticism, and ultimately what that comes down to is they believed that there were some gods who did negative things and some gods who did positive things. And it was as if there was this battle that took place over and over between the negative gods and the positive gods. Paul says that this is not a battle. That ultimately, yes, there's a war that's taking place, but it's not an equal battle where we look at Jesus and say, will he be able to thwart what Satan is attempting to do? Because when we look to the New Testament and we see Jesus have interactions with demons, it's never the demons saying, oh, we're about to rough up Jesus. We're going to get a new tattoo after this battle with Jesus. That's not what happened. Jesus says, hey, demons, go get in the pigs and run off the cliff. And they run off the cliff. That's not an equal battle. It says that Jesus is the ruler over all things, all authorities, all principalities. When we're using these words, what Paul is really saying to the people is, all of the things that cause fear in your heart, all of the things that would cause you to question God, all of the things that would make your heart hurt in the consideration of how God works, all of the things that you are petrified of, this Jesus who you've placed your faith in, this Jesus who you've placed your trust in, this Jesus who you say you've placed your hope in, he is unmoved by those things. Because he reigns and rules over all things. He's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. Everything in creation is created for the purpose of saying that Jesus reigns over all. Because we are created for the glory of God. Now, you don't use the word glory a whole lot, but ultimately what that means is you are created in your existence to say that Jesus is a really big deal. It's what we're created for. However, the way that we respond sometimes is not by saying that Jesus is a big deal who we worship and we serve. Actually, our lives would say this, that I'm a big deal who Jesus worships and serves. That I'm a big deal and Jesus not only exists as co-equal with me, but Jesus exists to serve me. And when we step on that ground, we've